I think 80% of solving negative friction is communication. The other 20% is communication. It's unbelievable. And as you grow, we have a team that's really global now. We have certain areas where there's a concentration of people, but as we're expanding, we have people in Europe and Asia and around the States. It's really important that we have people on the same page and that people are all owning the same goals for the year, the mission, and that everyone recognizes we're in the same boat. And we have some amazing leaders that never point fingers. Always, it's a different attitude. It's the opposite. How can we help? Is there anything that we can help? Because trying to solve circularity, in our particular case in fashion, there's so many variables that are all interconnected. Like where are you getting your feedstock? What's the cost of that? What's the logistics? That impacts how much you can sell your product, and what type of energy are you using, and I could go on and on. There's all kinds of engineering things. And so it could be very easy to point to other departments and say, this is your problem. This is, that's someone else's problem. And there should be a little bit of healthy organizational tension, but the emphasis here is on healthy. Yeah. So I think communication's the biggest one.
Hi everybody, I'm Lorne Rubis, the host of Culture Talks, and this is where we engage next-gen leaders and talk to them about how they're taking on the world's nastiest, toughest problems, and how they're also building great places to work. Not perfect, but great places to work. And we want to know a little bit about why the heck they're doing it and how they're doing it. And today, we're fortunate enough to have Peter Majeranowski, who's the co-founder and CEO of Circ.Earth, and it is a textile to textile retailing company, a material innovation company, a fashion technology company, and it's on a mission to protect the planet from the cost of clothing. And Peter, it's so great to have you here.
Great to be here.
To meet in the Catskills in New York. You're a fellow of a great company called Unreasonable Group that has about 400 great companies like yours. I get a chance to be a mentor there, and we had a chance, and I was just awestruck by you and your company, and so great to have you. But why don't you just, like you do, frame up the problem that Circ.Earth is working on. Then we'll talk a little bit about the company and how you're building it. So what's the nasty problem that you're wrestling with?
Yeah, well, first of all, Lauren, thanks for having me, and I'd love to talk about what we do. Clothing's universal. We wear it everywhere globally, but often like food, nobody really knows how it's made, who makes it, what it's made from, and definitely not its impact. It's one of the biggest polluters on our planet, and it's something so personal to all of us. It's how we really express ourselves to the world. Yet it's extremely wasteful, linear, damaging, both from an ecological point of view and a social perspective. And one of the main challenges with the resources that go into clothing is that less than 1% gets recycled back into textiles. And the reason why is the majority of clothing is a blend of plastics with natural fibers, polyester and cotton. We've developed a method that can unstick the two from each other, clean them up, put them back into the very beginning of the supply chain, and the existing supply chain as a drop-in, so we can make new clothing from old clothing.
That is so cool, and I know that, this is really kind of, and all the chemical engineers out there and all the operating people and process people would want to geek out on your technology. And it's pretty interesting and really breakthrough stuff. But you've also been, you were a finalist in the Earthshot Prize. You're like Fast Company's, one of the most Fast Company's innovative companies. And you're trying to change this world kind of one fiber at a time, that you say. And it's really challenging. You're working with great retail brand companies like Zara, and I notice now Eileen Fisher and companies like that. But this has been a tough road to hoe. Can you talk a little bit about the challenge in front of you, trying to go and take on this challenge by it's shocking when you think about it. 1% gets recycled. Didn't you talk about, was it you that said that we could almost see the waste fill of clothing from space if it was dumped on it?
You can, yeah. In places like Chile and Ghana, you can see the amount of waste, and most of it came from North America and Europe. It was donated, then didn't sell, got traded, and ended up in the global south in these unsanctioned landfills, or worse, it gets burned. Wow. So it's a huge challenge. And we're not minimizing the challenge at all at Circ, internally or externally. And if you think about it, this is the industry that started the Industrial Revolution. We use rivers to power looms. And the fashion brands that we all know and love haven't owned their supply chain for a long time. They're just great marketers and retailers that happen to sell clothing. So we're trying to change the oldest industry that's very global, very optimized, and not very concentrated. It's not like some industries where 4 or 5 companies control 80% of the market share. So we have to work through all those dynamics to really bring about new change and new innovation, and that's where Circ has had to really exert leadership as a newcomer.
Yeah, because you're changing the mindset of so many people in the whole ecosystem, all the way along the way, right? I mean, that's right. That industry has, as you say, is one of the oldest industries, and it's brought up on essentially just bringing in new fiber and then creating it, and people wear it, like you say, 5-6 times on average, and then throw it away, and it ends up and there's been no circularity. You're bringing circularity to this whole system, but the minds that you have to change. But I want to take you back to a personal moment. And tell me if you're comfortable talking about this. You're a naval officer.
Yes, sir.
I remember you talking about being in the seas and dealing with pirates. And are you okay talking about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So
pirates and smugglers.
I want to know, you talk about having to actually get on board some of these ships that have been taken over and commandeered by pirates. And the courage involved and the uncertainty, can you bring what was the lessons learned about Peter as a naval officer on these incredible seas, and how that translates to being a CEO and founder of this company?
Yeah, it makes me think of the first time I told my mother. I said, oh, guess what? I reported to my ship, and I'm going to be the damage control assistant. And oh, by the way, I'm also going to have this collateral duty boarding ships smuggling oil out of Iraq. And I could just feel through the phone how her blood pressure went way up. And mine too, frankly, because I envisioned that as a naval officer on ships, I was going to be very much worried about complex weapon systems, navigation, maintenance organizations, but not really putting myself in harm's way. And since then, with the wars we've had, it still really pales in comparison to what many of our veterans have had to do. But for me, it was a huge growth moment from a leadership perspective. You talk about imposter syndrome. I barely made the minimum weight to join the Navy, and here I am leading a crew of badass sailors boarding ships that are trying to smuggle in the nighttime oil out of Iraq. And so it was a big growth moment for me, and really leaning into the teams and recognizing that leadership and respect is really all about a two-way street, and being very honest about what your capabilities are and what capabilities you need, and pushing the team for highest standards possible so that everybody comes home safe.
Yeah, so do you have any stories that just stick with you that are like, whoa, that was like mind-blowing experience?
Yeah, we had one particular ship that was extremely aggressive towards us, and it was really the only time we had to physically put people down, restrain them, pull weapons, zip ties, you name it. And it was... when we first boarded the ship, we were literally stepping over people that were asleep on the deck. They had no idea we were there. Wow. And it got a little bit hairy, but our training kicked in. And the strange thing was that this ship had no illicit cargo that we could find. And we looked very hard because of the stance and posture they took. And it was more because they had a very strong negative feeling towards the United States, and particularly the master. And the master of the ship, the captain, talk about leadership, like that set the tone for the rest of the organization. And what I learned from that and from future boardings was that I quickly had to win the trust, in essence, of the master, and recognize that he's trying to do a job. He's trying to put money on his table, food on his table for his family, and then just quickly come to a professional understanding. I've got my job to do, you did your job, you're now in this situation, I'm your best way out. And that made me really much more effective, I think, as a boarding officer in terms of collecting evidence and getting the ship handled and processed.
Wow, that is a powerful lesson for sure. So you're debriefing on the way back when you're thinking about that, and what's the team saying on the way out, on the way back, and now you've done it, it's over. What's everybody saying?
I think, it's been a while, but as I recall, it was kind of a happiness in the sense that we did the mission and we did it well and everybody was safe and okay, but also a little bit of strutting. We handled the situation and we did it well, and I think that camaraderie is important because you got to get ready to do it the next day.
Yeah, well, that's great, and I appreciate you sharing that story. And I'm going to take you to, and I was curious about. Oh, I hope I didn't lose it here. This is a quote from you about 2025 or 2024, and I just had it here. And you talked about what you learned from 2024, and what a powerful message. I think it was something along the lines around true breakthroughs don't come from magic kind of things or grand gestures. It's the daily grind. That was your so can you build on that 2024 kind of reflection message around where you're taking Circ next and how that's informed you?
Yeah, I think it touches on what we spoke about in terms of just the challenges of changing such an old industry, and just being eyes wide open and totally upfront with your team and partners and stakeholders, and then just focusing on getting wins, even if they're small wins, because they really build on each other. It builds on your confidence, it builds on the confidence of your team, you start to get traction with partners, and that's so critical and so important. We say at Circ, we're only as good as our last knife fight. And so maybe we don't celebrate enough those wins, but we quickly start looking to the next one. And I think just going one step at a time is so important. And so many times when it comes to especially environmental challenges and clean tech, it's easy to get beat down and it's easy to get discouraged. And it's like that proverb, you eat how do you eat an elephant? It's one spoonful at a time. That's kind of how we approach this business, and it's worked for us.
When I was listening to you talk about Circ when we were in New York, and I think I might have made a comment to you that I think you were made for this company, Peter, because it's so big. I mean, the issue is so big, and that I know you've got an undergraduate degree from Cornell, an MBA from Duke. You've got all the bells and whistles. You've raised money, you've run things. You can play both the technology, the business side, the people side. It's a big, tough, gnarly problem, and you have to be big enough to step into the space and to take it on. And so purpose really matters. Can you talk about that? I know you're a B Corp, but it sounds like part of what you really have done is really just aligned your team on your deep purpose. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that come to mind when you talk about that. When you're a venture-backed company, in the earliest stages, you have to wear a lot of hats, and we joke, Aaron Brockovich, go to Google, I guess now ChatGPT, and try to be a lawyer and a marketer and a lot of different functions. And as you get traction and go forward, you're able to raise some money, you're able to really hire people that are experts who've done this before. And mission and purpose is super important in terms of attracting the best people who have the experience but are also mission aligned and excited by the mission and excited by the core values of the company. And when you get those people on board, in some ways, my job got a lot easier because I have a world-class expert in operations or in engineering or in people or HR that can help me and really empower me and empower the company to do things better. But on the other hand, it's like the stakes get bigger and the expectations are higher. And so you open up a whole nother set of challenges. But I enjoy those challenges, and it's a lot more fun doing it with great experts. And so A big part of my time, particularly the last few years, has been more and more focused on the purpose of the company, aligning everybody on the purpose, making sure that we have the right people that match our core values. And if they match or not, it's not a judgment call on someone. There's another good place for that person. It just not happen to be with Circ. And nobody gets it right. I think even the best CEOs in the world probably are maybe lucky if they get it right 60% of the time. Recognizing this is not a good fit, and it's really, I think, incumbent upon both parties to just part ways sooner than later. And that took me some time to learn. And I think part of that was coming from the Navy, where you really couldn't fire people. You just try to rehabilitate and figure it out. And I think I held on to that a little bit too long.
I want to come back to your values, which you're quite explicit on here in a minute, but I want to just dig a little bit further into purpose and alignment there. How do you, you've got people in France, you've got people in Virginia, you've got people all over the place, a lot of people are remote. You know, you obviously want to get the highest technical capability, whatever role that they're in. How do you help determine whether they're aligned on purpose? They deeply believe in what Circ's doing, and they're not there punching their resume up. They're really punching out your purpose, making it more true.
Yeah, so we have three core values that we talk a lot about. Do the right thing, solve big problems, sharp minds, soft hearts. And when we are in the hiring process, we do kind of initial screening just to make sure the qualifications are there. But then we have an interview that's all about values and purpose to see if they're a real good cultural fit in that sense. And then if that is checked as a box, then we continue to move on in terms of just personalities and specific resume builders or tasks or expertise that we need. But that is very important. And in terms of the after hiring, you know, it's very important that you have good onboarding processes. We've learned that the hard way, that, you know, you want to make someone feel welcome. It's the worst thing in the world you can do is bring someone you're excited and they show up and you don't have an email for them, or they don't know where to sit, or they don't have a job function, or there's no reporting structure put in place. And so we onboard, we talk to them about the history of the company, about the different inflection points of the company, about our core values, where we're going. All of that, I think, is really important to make someone, you know, truly wear the Circ logo. And we have a welcome package with Circ hats and mouse pads and everything talking about our core values, because we really want to make people feel part of the Circ mission and part of the Circ family.
Pete, you have no idea how badly organizations do this. It's so, like, if anything that our audience gets out of this is a reinforcement around how important, first, alignment, recruiting to it, both purpose and values, and I want to come back to those three values. The end, though, also is that how both the onboarding and the welcome, both, and how vital they are. Like, when you put all that effort into finding the right person, and then it's like they show up and it's like no one's there to really bring them on and you know, facilitate their speed to contribution. I'm so encouraged to hear a CEO talk like that, believe in it, reinforce it. It's so vital. Now, I don't want you to give away your secret sauce, but if you were interviewing me for a top position, hit me with some of those questions you might ask me about trying to around whether I was aligned up to the Circ purpose or not.
You know, some of the things that I personally do, and I have other teammates that do this all the time, so I'm not the best person to ask this, but I love to ask people what they do for fun. And it's, I think, become kind of a running joke in the company that I hear whispers about when people talk about when they first meet me, that I ask them about this. But it's very telling to me when you get somebody excited about their hobby or their passions. You start to get a very good feel for somebody and a feel for their values. So that's maybe one of my secrets. The other one is I try to probe a little bit on some of the issues that we're solving and get a sense of where are they in terms of understanding some of the major climate challenges that the planet is facing. How much do they understand? Are they just talking the talk, or they really deeply understand that? Those things are very important.
Yeah, because I guess they could kind of play the greenwashing game if they wanted to themselves, right? But I'm going to go right back at you around you and fun. Like, What do you like? What do you do for fun, Pete? How do you have those moments when you just have a good laugh or you just have some fun?
I'm on the water. Anything on the water, ideally sailing is my go-to. There's nothing like having the wind, feeling the wind basically pick you up and push you along, and it's quiet and you can really hear nature. There's no motors. Well, maybe when we're trolling out there, but for me, that is the ideal day.
I'm going to come back to that wind because I'm curious about the wind behind Circ. But I want to go to those values for a minute. Like, I love some of your language in your website. We're just a bunch of science-loving humans on a mission to achieve circularity, chemistry and fashion, lots of heart for Earth. One of your values is, of the three, and I've never heard it written this way before, sharp minds, soft hearts. How did that emerge? Like, how did that, and in fact, I want to hear, if you don't mind, how all three values emerge, why they came to the forefront, and they're the ones you're really digging in on.
Yeah, so I think I have to go back a little bit in Circ history. We were originally called Titan Biosciences. Titan is the Polish word for tobacco. We were using a specific zero nicotine tobacco plant as a biofuel feedstock. And it's a long story of how that biofuels, the oil prices went down and nobody wanted to invest anymore. We really had to find another application of our technology or close the doors. Those are really dark days. We were looking at our runway 2 weeks at a time. I'd probably block most of it out. And when we figured out we could do textile recycling and we felt immediately the market pull, it was a great feeling. It was that feeling of you sitting on a sailboat with no wind and all of a sudden the wind shows up. Yeah. That was the feeling we had. And we realized that Titan Biosciences didn't really communicate to a very marketing-oriented industry what we were doing. And it was one of my partners, our COO, Connor Hartman, who said, we should really think about rebranding, engaging a marketing company to help us. We still work with this great firm in Raleigh, Baldwin, and that was almost like a group therapy session for us. The rebrand was more internal than it was external. And we also started working with another kind of a business consultant coach, and we started thinking to ourselves, if we could create a spaceship of the ideal Circ employees that would reflect who we are as a company and then go to another planet to populate it, or it's a terrible analogy probably, but who would they be? What would they be like? And those core values, we got to start talking about that. Prior to that, we didn't talk about core values. We didn't talk about mission because we had so many fires to put out. And I think that's a common trap for a lot of young tech companies. It's just you have so many problems, you're so practical, you're too practical that you totally forget about the human component of it. And it's all about the human component when you really think about it.
Right.
And you just are that's all blah, blah, let's get this problem done, and then that problem, and then that problem, and you lose sight. So for us, it was a huge inflection point, and that's really when a lot of the growth and some of the great things you mentioned with Circ has happened was after that reset. And after we sat in the room and thought about the values that we want to talk about over and over and that we thought was the best reflection of Circ's best foot forward.
That's a great story. And do you have any ways that you kind of intentionally try to reinforce them other than through your hiring process? Are there ways that you like to tell stories or make them more true? What do you do to kind of embellish them at Circ?
Yeah, we hire, in some cases, unfortunately, fire based on those values. We promote based on those values. We talk about them almost all hands, every month. We talk about them. We really double down on them. This month, there's a lot of DEI stuff happening in the U.S., if you've been reading the headlines. And so we felt it important to address that head on with our company and talk about how our values are unwavering. And so that's a big way to do it. If you go to a Circ facility, they're written on the walls. Something I got out of the Navy, where surface warfare officer school, you walked in and a big lobby, it said, take care of your people. That's a very important value that I've held on to my whole life. And so we've really needed to continue to emphasize that. And I think values can't be just something you throw on a website. You got to talk about them and you got to live them. And we often try, when we're reflecting on what went right or what went well or why we made a decision, we'll often tie it to one of the core values.
That's fantastic. Do you have any stories come to your mind that are kind of becoming kind of part of the almost storybook or legends, or either that really went well or big screw ups that maybe where you went the other way and you use that as a learning kind of thing?
Yeah, I think they put me on the spot. We generally try to have a collection of stories.
It's hard to pull them out of that because I know that you almost got to walk by them sometime and do it more spontaneously. But I just want curious if any came to.
Yeah, so one of them, a good example, like do the right thing, is it can be trite, but it's not. I mean, we talk about how we really value our reputation, but also the reputation of our partners. And I think that's something that I universally hear from a lot of our partners. And we couldn't do what we're doing without partners. To be a small innovator and work in really old, big, established chemical companies around the world, you have to build those relationships. And so there's been situations where maybe our partner didn't do something right, and then it goes down the supply chain, and it could be go up to the brands and really hurt their businesses, and we come to appreciate them and not try to blame it and just think about the ramifications and how to better address that with the value chain and the brands so that we don't burn bridges. And I think I kept a lot of the names there anonymous, but examples like those are very important for Circ.
So and I don't know if I've captured this adequately or accurately, is the T-shirt story a moment? The Swedish company that calls and says,
Yeah,
can you do this with a T-shirt? And
that was a huge moment.
yeah, is that a solve big problem, soft heart moment there?
Yeah, that was definitely a solve a big problem. And even before that, I think it was the sharp mind. So at first I said, no, let's not do it. I don't want to get the reactors messed up or anything like that. And we did it. And then we didn't even know if it was a big enough problem.
I'm going to stop you for a minute for our audience. You've been doing this stuff around pulp, a lot of stuff around tobacco, other stuff, and you're going, this biofuel stuff is tough.
Yeah.
You get a call from a Swedish company says, we love your technology. Can you do something with a T-shirt?
Pretty much.
We're simplifying it. I know I am, but there's
Yeah.
a moment there, and you go, no, it's going to screw up our whole chemical process, whatever. But you pivot.
We pivot. Yeah, we were looking at all kinds of ag residue to make non-tree pulp was basically what we were working on. That's how we were talking to these Swedish pulp traders. And to their credit, they said, hey, what about recovering something of value from a T-shirt? To your point, I said no at first. But then I thought, okay, we have to try things. We're desperate. We're here with our back against the wall. And so that's where the sharp mind aspect comes into play. And when we did it, we had to understand the ramifications of this solution. And we recognized that textiles is one of the largest polluters on the planet. It's so resource intensive, and it's accelerating. We wear twice as much clothing today as we did 20 years ago. As you mentioned, typical garments worn 7 to 10 times. More people are coming to the planet. More people are coming out of poverty in middle-income countries, and the first thing they're buying is more clothing. So we have to solve this thing one way or another. It's inevitable. And that really didn't change anything. Biofuels was solving a big problem. This was probably solving an even bigger problem. And so we jumped right on it.
I was sitting there in New York when you were describing this, and I should have. I just don't know why. I just take it for granted. I hadn't realized the problem is so big. It is so big. I was reading in your documentation that, like, if we don't do anything about this, if Circ's not successful and other companies like you, it's like 20% of all of our carbon emission is going to come from textiles. I mean, it's not sustainable. It's just unbelievable how big it is.
Yeah, it's roughly right now about 10% of annual greenhouse gas emissions. And to give some perspective on that number, aviation and marine combined is maybe 6%. So it's a serious emitter.
So, one of the things I like to talk to CEOs about is, as you're building this company, Peter, as you're getting more momentum and you're using lots of partners, but you're starting to build your team. You have this experience around being in the Navy, so you've got a little and other places. But one of the things we're learning is that one of the things that gets in the way is negative friction, is waste of energy, waste of time, waste of bad dumb rules, stupid things. What do you do as a CEO to take negative friction out, to kind of fight against it from getting inside the company so that everybody kind of concludes the day feeling like they brought value and they've done that?
I think 80% of solving negative friction is communication. The other 20% is communication. It's unbelievable. And as you grow, we have a team that's really global now. We have certain areas where there's a concentration of people, but as we're expanding, we have people in Europe and Asia and around the States. It's really important that we have people on the same page and that people are all owning the same goals for the year, the mission, and that everyone recognizes we're in the same boat. And we have some amazing leaders that never point fingers. Always, it's a different attitude. It's the opposite. How can we help? Is there anything that we can help? Because trying to solve circularity, in our particular case in fashion, there's so many variables that are all interconnected. Like, where are you getting your feedstock? What's the cost of that? What's the logistics? That impacts how much you can sell your product, and what type of energy are you using, and I could go on and on. There's all kinds of engineering things. And so it could be very easy to point to other departments and say, this is your problem, this is, that's someone else's problem. And there should be a little bit of healthy organizational tension, but the emphasis here is on healthy.
Yeah.
So I think communication's the biggest one. We have a system that works for a little bit, and then we grow in certain areas of our team and it stops working, and we reassess and we change it just to ensure we keep improving communications. It's something you got to constantly work on.
Right, and the end with that is learning and adaptability, right? I mean, you're constantly, how many times have you pivoted, Peter? I mean, how many times have you had to pivot? Like,
major pivots too, but then within our current circular textiles, we've had to make a lot of it, little adjustments here and there.
Right, and
some not so little.
And it's adaptability, right? I mean, it's like,
yeah.
And now you've got AI coming into your world, you've got all the other machine learning that's attached to that. You've got all the geopolitical stuff. I mean, you're in France, you're in elsewhere, and you've got tariffs and God knows what. It's pretty crazy. So this adaptability. So what do you do to help build fast learning at Circ? How do you reinforce that? How do you model it as a CEO?
Well, model is a key word because so much of this is driven by economics and the financing. And so we do have to model our greatest and latest thinking and use that as a tool to see areas where you have the most sensitivity, and those are the knobs you want to turn most. And so you know where to focus resources. But it goes back to getting the senior leadership team from the key functional areas together, often forming committees or task force teams, multifunctional, together, working on that challenge, because it doesn't really always lie with just engineering or just commercial or just operations. It's that cross-functionality that's so important.
I always think about that as your background, where you've got a team of people collaborating, having each other's back. When you're climbing that vessel, that you're looking after each other, you're working as systemically. There's not one particular. It's a system that you're building, and that. How do you deal with mistakes at Circ? I mean, there's always time when you get pissed off and you want to throw something and
kick the wall.
How do you manage that in a way that's constructive? You're human, and you're not going to be perfect, but how do you try and bring that into the company when you have your town halls, or you have your all teams, you call them? How do you reinforce that?
We try very much to have accountability a big part of the culture at Circ, and a lot of the way you maintain that is by good hiring and having people that really put accountability. And I just had a call with a few of my teammates last week, and we all took responsibility. This is my fault. No, it's my fault. It's no, my fault. And we were laughing that it was so Circ-like that everybody was quick to jump on the grenade and take responsibility, or jump on the sword. So I think that's very critical to do that, and then to really just not look at a mistake as binary, even though sometimes it really can be or feel like it. To look at it and say, okay, what did we learn from this? What could we have avoided? What can we do better? Now, if it's a mistake that's out of malice or something like that, that's something you got to cut right out. But very well-intentioned people, mission-driven, very smart, can make mistakes. We're also trying to do, 10 pounds of work with a 5-pound lift, so everybody's strained. And I think you have to be when you're venture backed. I love the Marion quote, if everything feels under control, you're not going fast enough. And so when you're going fast, too fast, sometimes balls will drop, and it's really not productive to just flame anyone or burn anyone. And people, whomever made the mistake, they take it so hard that it's almost better to instead start thinking about what can we do to learn from that and rebuild from that as an organization than anything else.
I want to park there for a minute, Pete, because not everybody, a lot of people like accountability to be able to hold other people accountable.
Yeah.
When I hear that you've got a team of people that the first thing they stand up and say, here's how I think I could have done this better, or I'm sorry, I could have, here's what I learned. That's a whole different thing when everybody's having that. But if they're going to come to the table and everybody's out going, I'm going to put my armor on because I know that I'm going to get pointed at, it's a different experience. It's a different team. And whatever you've done to create that, congratulations. That's a huge part of the culture, the self-accountability piece. It's massive, and not everybody gets it.
Yeah, and I think another lesson learned in my case is, as I've said many times, you have to wear a lot of hats early on in a company. And when do you start bringing on someone full-time to deal with finance or to deal with whatever? And in my case, hiring a good people person, a head of HR, a head of experience, a lot of, I think, venture-backed companies feel like, oh, that's something I can outsource. That's we can do that on our own. These are adults. These are professionals. We don't need to do that. And I had somebody say to me, no, whatever you think you should do it 3 quarters earlier. And I think that was very valuable advice and really enabled me, because as a CEO, your day is really about prioritizing and time management. It's so hard, and it can be easy to forget about that and lose sight of that. And so having somebody who wakes up every day thinking about the team and the people and helping me find my blind spots or get to a problem before it even turns to smoke and, God forbid, fire, right, is super important. And so that's something I really internalized as a lesson from my journey.
It's one of the reasons why I'm having these sessions, because other leaders out there, I think, benefit from hearing you say that. It's not like you could, it's easier to say, well, it's not EBITDA, and it's not cash flow, and it's not, some chemical. It's, at the end of the day, there's a human being in front of every single thing that Circ does, every single thing, and that it's a conscious investment on your part. Whether we're a technology company like you are and most companies are these days, it's people driven overall, and and that's who we are. And to have that, I can say it, but when other CEOs say it, when you're living it, it just is such an inspiration to other people. That's just we're so grateful to just have you all reflecting on those things in your own kind of way. So thank you for that. The wind in the sail. If you were, as we kind of move towards kind of closing up our conversation, if you had all the kind of wishes around the wind in the sail for Circ, what are some things that would start to kind of create that additional wind for you?
It's a great question, and it's something I think about a lot. The industry has a very acute problem with being very wasteful and very linear. Regulators have taken notice, their customers have taken notice, brands have responded by making targets and goals. There are solutions out there. There's capital out there that wants to fund those solutions to scale. And the one missing piece is that the brands need to commit to long-term purchase agreements or offtakes, which is something they've never done before. And so I'm giving you a very tactical answer here, but it's really important for the capital that's out there to see that the brands are committed long-term, 5, 6, 7 years, so that after we build it, after we hire everybody, we turn it on, we're making the product in spec, they will buy it. And it's starting to happen. I recognize that these are companies that typically buy one season at a time. They buy finished garments. They don't buy the raw materials that make those finished garments. So we have to work through that, and we've been working through that. And a big part of that is building teams and coalitions within the industry, within the supply chain, so that we really make it a no-brainer for the brands to do this. And I think this is the final piece, not just for Circ, but all the innovation around textiles, whether it's dyeing, demand projections, logistics, warehousing, sorting, you name it. We need those long-term demand signals from the brands in order to get the brands to have other people's money solve the problems for them.
And as customers, the more aware we are that, and we start, I like the Prince William buying the ties from that small little company that is, you know, repurposing fabric, and but we just need to increase that awareness around all of us, around, you know, one fiber at a time. When you have your hardest days, when you want to quit, what do you do to help get yourself over the top? Get going, get up the next morning.
A nice martini. And I think about that I have the privilege to fail. There's so many people that life didn't deal them the cards that I've been dealt. Maybe their life ended very prematurely from combat or whatever. And, you know, here I am. I have this privilege to fail, and I never look at failure as binary anyway. I'm sure my investors don't want to hear that. And then I think a lot about the team and how passionate they are about this, and how I really owe it to them.
So it's 5 years from now. You're having a hell of a celebration. The champagne's uncorked.
Yeah.
You've rocked to a whole nother scaled level, and the team's standing out there in front of you and you're talking to them. And what do you tell them that you're most proud of about them?
I'm proud of all the things we spoke about, right? I'm proud of the accountability culture. I'm proud of the hard work, the effort, the selflessness, the healthy environment and culture that they've helped promote, and what they've done. It's really about a selfless organization, and without that, I don't think the success we've had to date would be possible, or the success we will have in 5 years.
You know, when I'm going to go back to my comment about that somebody has to be big enough to take on this big problem, and that you seem like you were made to do this, and I mean that from the bottom of my heart, Peter. So
Excellent.
grateful that you would come on our little show here and share your insights. You're an inspiration, as your colleagues are, and we need next-gen leaders like you. And also the courage to recognize that it's more than just the technology, it's more than just the process, it's more than just the financial model. It really does absolutely. It's also a massive amount about engaging the people and to build workplaces for people to thrive. Thanks for being part of that, and I look forward to watching you and being a big cheerleader as you continue to grow Circ. Thanks for everything, Peter.
Thank you, and thank you